Hello and welcome to the Gaggle What We Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, over the weekend, we had the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and President Putin delivered sort of, his familiar speech, heavy on economic statistics and economic details about what Russia's doing and how it's been coping in the past couple of years. After this long speech, he sat down for a Q&A with Professor Sergei Karaganov. Now, we've done a couple of podcasts in the past about Sergei Karaganov, because we focused on Karaganov's kind of rather interesting take on how Russia should set about dealing with its NATO enemies.
Yeah, the word "interesting" is operative here. George, keep going.
Just to summarize what Karaganov was saying is that basically deterrence is no longer working. Yeah. The Western powers are not afraid of Russia anymore. They're not afraid of Russia resorting to nuclear weapons, and because of that, the Western powers are just going to keep escalating, because I think they've now figured out a foolproof system of waging war against Russia whilst not waging war. So he suggested that Russia should use nuclear weapons, not even in a demonstrative way. He didn't say, well, we should just simply let off a nuclear weapon into space as to have a demonstrative effect, because I think he rightly says, well, even if you do that, that still doesn't mean that you have any credibility that you will use nuclear weapons. The very fact that you're doing it demonstratively indicates that you don't have the stomach for it.
And it's very interesting, George, the demonstrative example actually was floated a few days before the conference. So there is a connection right there. I saw some of, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I don't want to use his name because I don't want to get the wrong guy, but I read his piece, and this was a stalking horse for me. Okay, it's putting it out there. I was not convinced that it was a good idea. I wasn't sure what the response was supposed to be to such a demonstrative detonation. Okay,
right. And
but the point is that it's being seeded out there into the public, okay, in the public conversation.
Well, that's the thing, that because in the past we had this theory of mutually assured destruction, nobody really tested it out whether is this really believable, because ultimately you say, well, who's going to be stupid enough to be the first to launch a nuclear attack? And so if no
and who wants to be the person to say, oh, it works?
That's right. So Karaganov said, well, no, we've got to start obviously with a limited nuclear strike, but in other words, to show that we mean business. But nonetheless, it was interesting that it was Karaganov who was chosen to be the moderator of this discussion. Moderator. He's not exactly a moderate, but nonetheless, he was the moderator. And so the discussion was interesting, but again, Putin is very diplomatic, and he never says anything very, anything too outrageous. So I want to just then show you a little bit of their discussion on this question. And here we have. So here's the first question from Karaganov. It says, let's move on to the more political issues. You always talk about your desire to negotiate an end to the conflict with the West in Ukraine. This, of course, is a commendable and positive desire to negotiate, but with whom to negotiate? Our Western partners have cheated us many times and are violating all the agreements that we reach with them. The Kiev regime is morally illegitimate, politically illegitimate, and even legally illegitimate from the point of view of even the already failed state that exists there. And then again, how is it even possible to conduct any kind of negotiations with them without first defeating them, without achieving complete surrender, and without, so to speak, pointing a nuclear pistol at our Western opponents so they don't twitch anymore. Because in principle, any agreements now will not be implemented until there is a defeat, illegitimate and unreliable partners, how to deal with this. So you can see the tone is not exactly, moderate.
Well, and also everyone, just to give you a little color to this all, Karaganov, he's a very, very self-assured man, very self-assured. So when he's saying so that they don't twitch anymore, I mean, and he's got it's a little even diabolical when he talks like that, okay? Because he's got these kind of steely eyes. He's not a person to trifle with. I'm trying to put it that way.
Okay, so good point. And so Putin says, well, yes, but as Joseph Vissarionovich said. Now, Joseph Vissarionovich is, of course, Joseph Stalin. He says, I have no other writers. He spoke in relation to the Union of Writers of the USSR at one time. When Beria came to snitch on them, once again, he said, I have no other writers. Well, these are the partners. What should we do now? Fight with everyone or what? So I thought that was in itself interesting. I mean, to quote from Joseph Vissarionovich, I mean, even to refer to him as Joseph Vissarionovich is kind of somewhat facile. And then he says, we must, of course, seek agreements and conditions that would correspond to our interests and be as reliable as possible. You are right that it is very difficult to negotiate with such a public. They deceive at every step. They say one thing, do another. It's sad, but all armed conflicts end with some kind of a peace agreement. True, as one of the former leaders of a fairly significant European country told me, all these agreements can be based on either on the basis of military defeat or on the basis of victory. We, of course, strive and will achieve victory. Of course, that isn't entirely true. I mean, I don't think you need a peace agreement. I mean, there's no need.
No.
No. You just.
I mean, no, I mean, but okay, but of course, we of course strive and will achieve victory, but that has never been clearly explained what that is.
What constitutes victory exactly?
And that is done intentionally.
Right. The question of the legitimacy of those with whom we negotiate, yes, there are problems there, of course, because a preliminary, even a cursory analysis of the legislation of Ukraine shows that the current executive authorities have lost their legitimacy. There is the 103rd article of the Constitution, which says that the president is elected for only 5 years. There is the 83rd article of the Constitution, which states that in conditions of martial law, the powers of the Verkhovna Rada can be extended. Nothing has been said about extending the president's powers. To be honest, I don't really understand what the point of this is, because first of all, I mean, Putin is not a Ukrainian, so it's up to Ukrainians, whom they want to deem legitimate, illegitimate, in accord with the Constitution, not in accord with the Constitution. But also, Putin dealt with Poroshenko, and Poroshenko was, far less legitimate as leader than Zelensky. I mean, Poroshenko was a result directly of a coup, and nonetheless, Putin negotiated with Poroshenko. So I don't know what the point of.
Yeah, well, I think the rub here in this case is duly noted what you said. Poroshenko was the result of a coup.
Yeah.
But I mean, in this case right now, in the context of the question, I think the Russians have good reasons to believe that if Zelensky, parenthetically, signed something, how valid would it be? Would the West at some point in turn say, well, I mean, it's of the dubious legal value, okay, and it doesn't subscribe to our security arrangements with you, and they'll, the usual bullshit that they're going to say. Well, I think that's what the Russians are. That's what they see here is another shenanigan being played. But you're absolutely right, George. It's Ukraine. I mean, it's their problem.
Right. That's right. So the criminal code has relevant articles that talk about usurpation of power. It looks like we are dealing with a usurpation of power, but negotiations can still be conducted because, in my opinion, in accordance with Articles 109, 10, 11 of the Constitution, Powers are transferred to the Speaker of the Rada.
Okay.
So if you want to negotiate, you can find someone to negotiate with. We are ready for these negotiations, but only, I repeat, on the terms that we agreed on when we started these negotiations in Minsk and then in Istanbul, and not on some conjectures. Even if we take the agreements in Istanbul as a basis, we must still proceed from the realities of today. So this is in general terms.
How many leaders around the world know the articles of another country's constitution? I'm always amazed here.
He does have a very he has an amazing grasp of numbers and facts. I mean, he's talking without any notes.
Yeah.
You know, he's 70 years old, so you know that he's able to recollect all these details really is very impressive.
Well, what's also impressive, everyone, just think about it. You know, we can talk about what happened in 2008, what happened in 2014, what happened in 2022. Putin's been here the whole time.
Right,
okay?
right.
I mean, it's linear. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, he can talk about past American administrations, many of them now. Okay, because he was there. But I think the operative, in I don't know if you want to jump into it now. I can hold my horses if you want. But the whole thing about what does Istanbul mean now?
Yeah, yeah. If you want to talk about that, because he doesn't really talk about that much. So
what does it mean to you?
Well, to me, Istanbul was mostly about neutrality for Ukraine, and I think Russia was prepared to make an awful lot of concessions on the Donbass, and even to some extent on Crimea, just in order to get this commitment from Ukraine not to join NATO, to maintain neutrality, and not to have foreign armed forces on the territory. I think that was Istanbul. So when he says the realities on the ground, he said, okay, well, that deal now is no longer on the table because, well, you know, the battle lines have changed since then. I mean, that's how I understand.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, to add another layer to that, given the geographical change that has happened since Istanbul, essentially your reading is probably the same as mine, is that the territorial positioning is not up to much discussion. Okay, what is up to discussion is neutrality, no NATO infrastructure inside. Well, what would be the mechanism to make sure that that isn't contravened? I've always thought that. Okay, you can. Okay, we're neutral. Okay, and then you know the next week.
Yeah.
I think we got to have a new attackums here. Okay,
that's exactly right. That was always the problem. You know, there was never really any way you could do that unless you achieved regime change in Kiev, unless you brought in some new leadership who would basically, you know, say, hey, some Yanukovych type who would say, yeah, the interest of Ukraine is not to take any sides, but to be a kind of a bridge between East and West and whatever, which was Yanukovych's position. But if you don't have Yanukovych, then there's absolutely no way that you can guarantee that, yeah, fine, we won't have NATO infrastructure, and the next day NATO starts slipping in all of the infrastructure.
Why are George and I saying this? The Minsk process, okay, that was completely reneged on by the Kiev regime at the behest, or at least knowledge of its Western backers. So, I mean, demanding and getting neutrality in Ukraine. I mean, is it worth anything if you can't enforce it? That's the problem.
Right. No, I agree. I think that's really was a problem, and that's why past interventions, like the past Soviet interventions, were always about regime change. You install a regime that can then guarantee Soviet security, which is the same in Hungary and then in Czechoslovakia, and then that's it. But the key was that you install somebody there who's ready to play ball. In this case, it just I don't know, since there wasn't really anyone that they could install. I mean, I don't think Medvedchuk was just simply anybody who could do it. It was always just going to be a problem, which is, well, the West isn't going to stick to this. I mean, they're going to say, yeah, neutrality until no more neutrality. Anyway, then Karaganov says, Vladimir Vladimirovich Naturally, the maxim that all wars end in negotiations is a false maxim. Of course, it is being imposed on us. Most wars end in defeat and surrender of the enemy. This is the only way to end this war. So you notice he's very hawkish.
Yes, yes, everybody. He's not the tallest person, but he has a gravitas to him. Okay,
so you've met him, Peter?
a couple of times, yeah. Very charming. Oh, very charming. But he likes getting his way. that his question there is encapsulates him perfectly. Perfectly. That's him.
So as I move on to the next question, which is that the defeat and surrender of the enemy in the current circumstances, when America benefits from this war, and they will continue it, driving Ukrainians to slaughter and finishing them off, and now they will also drive Europeans to slaughter. This war will not be able to be stopped in the near future without rapid movement along the ladder of nuclear escalation. This is his argument. This is the first one. And then second, the plates under the world system have moved apart. There will be a lot of conflicts that will arise objectively. There used to be a nuclear fuse, but now it has seriously weakened, fear of nuclear weapons. Do we understand that we have a huge responsibility not only to win this war, and for this we need to go much tougher on the ladder of escalation and be ready to use it, but also to return this nuclear fuse to the international system in order to prevent movement towards huge wave of conflicts. After all, who besides us will do this? Who besides you will do this? So again,
this is such an impossible question.
It is. It is. But again, I mean, Putin
because
knew
there's so many moving parts in this.
But Putin knew what he was doing when he installed Karaganov there as the moderator.
What is his role in all of this? For me, it's very important. Is that in professional think tank like people here, this has been on the horizon now for the last 4 or 5 months. There's been a lot of chatter about this, okay? And now it's making it into the mainstream media, and now it is being very much made public for the general public. So there's an evolution to this thinking going on.
Right.
I have a lot of problems with it, but this is the origins of it.
No, that is right. But the problem is what the Western powers have done, and what, you know, when Biden specifically said, okay, you can use our missiles on Russian territory, killing Russians on Russian territory. We don't have a problem with that. And then you have the British and the French who've even gone beyond that and say, yeah, you can use our missiles on Russian territory and shoot them wherever you want. However deep inside Russian territory, we don't have a problem. And then we know that essentially the targeting is being done by the Americans. They're the only ones who have the satellite technology to do this. So in effect, the Americans are killing Russians on Russian territory. So you basically tossed out of the window that the deterrence, the theory of deterrence that has been operative all these years. You know, we don't mess with each other here. And so the question then is, well, what's Russia going to do about it? I mean, how long can you put up with this?
Yeah, but it's not in at least my reading of this question. I don't see how lighting the nuclear fuse is the way out. That's
right. No, that's not necessarily way out. Exactly. I mean, that's at least an option. Like it, but whether that's the right option, that's anyway, you have a huge responsibility. And if we crawl so slowly up this ladder, although there is, of course, movement, then I'm afraid that we will seem to be shirking this responsibility, although I understand the gravity of the moral choice.
You see what he does here? He goes right up to the line, then he takes a step back. You notice how he does that?
Right.
Very interesting.
But to be fair, it's one thing to be an academic or a pundit or whatever, but you're not the one who has to make the decision. I mean, you say, yeah, but it's still going to be your decision, not mine. I mean, I can, bang my fist on the table, demand that we use nuclear weapons, but I'm not the one who's going to make that decision.
Keep in mind, he is the hardest of hardliners in the think tank world here. He is and he likes having that reputation.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, anybody would like that reputation. Anyway, then Putin says, well, regarding nuclear escalation, we never started this rhetoric. I don't remember the name of this lady, the former prime minister of Great Britain, who when asked when she became prime minister, said that she was ready to press the nuclear button. Now, what was her name?
Oh, what a swipe. I don't remember her name. I don't remember the prime minister's name.
Former prime minister of Great Britain.
Oh God, it's perfect. Perfect.
Yes. Well, that was because what happened was she was taking part in these debates just before she was elected leader of the Conservative Party and therefore prime minister. She was with Rishi Sunak, and she was asked, by the moderator, would you be ready to press the button if need be? And she's like, "Yep, I'll be ready." Without any hesitation. I mean, apart from any, you think in itself is a really obscene or obnoxious to say, "Yep, I'm ready." But yeah, we never said that. This is where it all started. We simply responded that we needed to take this more seriously. We immediately started saying that we were rattling nuclear weapons. We don't rattle first. So I think there's a bad translation. I think they meant they immediately started saying that we were rattling nuclear weapons. And then secondly, what is use, non-use, in what case to use? We have a nuclear doctrine and everything is written there. Yesterday, I just spoke with the heads of the news agencies and said this. We have everything written there. Use is possible in exceptional cases in the event of a threat to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country in exceptional cases. So because basically there's according to Russian nuclear doctrine, as first is if in the event of a nuclear attack on Russia, but the second one is, this is what he's talking about, if there's a threat to the sovereignty and territorial integrity, not necessarily from nuclear weapons. So
not necessarily from nuclear weapons.
Exactly. Right. I don't think that such a case has arisen. There's no such need. But this doctrine is a living instrument, and we carefully monitor what is happening in the world around us and do not rule out making some changes to this doctrine. Okay, so we're not ruling it out to make some changes. And then now this is also connected with the testing of nuclear weapons. We not only signed it, so here is talking about the test ban treaty. Remember, so we had there was the nuclear test ban treaty. I think it was sometime in the late 90s. Russia signed it, ratified it. America signed it, didn't ratify it, and then Russia said, "Okay, we're dropping our ratification." That was late 2023. Russia said we no longer ratify this the test ban treaty. The America signed it but did not ratify it. So in today's conditions, we have withdrawn our ratification. But if necessary, we will conduct tests. So far, there is no such need either, since our information capabilities, computer ones, allow us to produce everything in its current form. And then now regarding speed, regarding results, you said that I have great responsibility. Yes, indeed. Is it possible to increase the speed of solving the problems we face? It is possible, but it is directly proportional to the losses. And understanding my responsibility, I still proceed from the General Staff and the Ministry of Defense proposals. Speed is important, but even more important is caring for the lives and health of our guys who are fighting at the front. Okay, so, and then it goes on. Combat work is underway. Just since the beginning of this year, 47 settlements, in my opinion, have been liberated, 880 square kilometers. We are gradually pushing the enemy out of the territory of the Donbass and other adjacent territories. The General Staff and the Ministry of Defense have plans for the implementation and achievement of all our goals. We are acting according to this plan. I am confident that all these plans are to be implemented.
Yes, but it's very interesting, everyone. And I believe there's no reason for us not to believe this, but it all very much begs the question, but this is not politics.
Right.
This is you can clear as many settlements as you want, but I mean, what about what's going to happen after?
Exactly.
We don't know.
That's exactly right. And I think that's why Karaganov doesn't seem at all satisfied with this.
No, he's never satisfied. Okay, never.
And says, oh, Karaganov. Nevertheless, we understand perfectly well that accelerating movement along the nuclear escalation ladder can save a large number of lives, because it can bring some sense to our opponents who took advantage of the fact that we, among others, have such an easy doctrine. I have no doubt that it will be changed. I hope that it will be changed soon, and you will now have the formal right to respond, if you so desire, with a nuclear strike to any attacks on our territory. Notice what he's saying again. When he says with a nuclear strike to any attacks on our territory, he said any attacks, in other words, nuclear or conventional. He says, no, he's not saying, oh, it's a nuclear strike in response to a nuclear strike. He's saying the nuclear strike to any attacks on our territory. So even a conventional attack merits a nuclear strike. This absolutely must be the sovereign right of our leader. I hope that such a statement will appear in our doctrine, and it will cool our opponents a little, and will also save our soldiers sooner or later. And then, of course, now it's probably too early to go for nuclear escalation.
Well,
but we need
goodness. Gee,
okay. Too early. I was surprised that he somehow pulled back and said, well, yeah, maybe it's a little early, because I thought that he already said we need to do it like yesterday. But we need to move towards this in order to cool down our opponents. They went crazy, especially the Europeans. They are going for war for the third time in almost 100 years. The Americans are much more careful. They fed the Ukrainians, they pushed them, and they themselves are much more careful. But the Europeans are going to war, which is indeed true. I mean, the Americans are always, they're the orchestrators of everything, but it's the Europeans who are stupid enough to play along with these American plans. And then Karaganov goes on, I'm a hunter. I know how animals behave. If you are attacked by a pack of wild dogs or hyenas and you have a stick, then you can hit them, drive them away, and there is a chance that you will drive them away. I doubt it. I mean, they're pretty strong, these wild dogs and hyenas. But anyway, but most likely they will tear your trousers, and then if you get tired, they will gnaw your leg off. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I was thought. If you have the opportunity to nail a couple, they will run away. I guarantee it. And then they talk about President Mnangagwa, who is the president of Zimbabwe. He showed up. President Mnangagwa knows the habits of hyenas. Do you agree with me, Mr. President, that this is how they disperse hyenas? And then he said, yeah, there are a lot of hyenas in Zimbabwe, but they are kept in national parks, so they do not bother us. We don't have any problems with them, and they multiply quickly. If someone wants a hyena, we can give it to you.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, that's
I think it's a
for
kind
another
of
time,
light entertainment. And then Putin says, well, we have enough of our own. Anyway, so then we go on. So Karaganov in Europe, again, I repeat this question. I bring it to the end. If we do not move decisively along the ladder of escalation, will we not anger the gifts of the Almighty? After all, the Almighty once showed us the way when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah with fiery rain for dissipation and debauchery. And after this, humanity remembered this for many years and behaved carefully. But now it has forgotten about Sodom and Gomorrah. He brought up this before, this business of Sodom and Gomorrah, that you have to somehow rain down, this hell and fury.
I feel very uncomfortable with this kind of messianic talk. So
me too. Because I mean, either you're talking about, seriously about nuclear strategy and escalation and limited escalation or whatever, but once you start talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, then
well, I mean, the point is, everyone, is that these weapons are uniquely different. Now, you can have the school of thought, no, this is just a degree. It's just like anything else, but it's just more powerful. More intensity and all that. I don't want to do that, okay? Because that means that it's just nothing is off the table. This kind of loose talk and all that. No, once something in exchange like that happens, we don't know. But I think enough common sense is that this could get a little out of control.
You're absolutely right. But the problem is still What does Russia do? I mean, this can't go on. You can't just allow
Agree.
what
I
NATO is
agree.
doing. You can't just allow them to essentially
Well,
attack.
I mean,
Yeah.
but that's why, George, hang on, get some light here. That's why when it comes to this discussion, I find myself always defaulting to Article 5, okay? Because look, this may be a bit crude. I need to think about it more. But let's say there is a huge arms depot on the Polish border, and you have an airstrip, and you have attackaments and HIMARS, and and they're attacked. And Russia was saying this hypothetical. This is only my opinion, that they were attacked because their mission, their design is to kill Russian soldiers in Ukraine and in Russia. Now, we're not attacking Poland per se. We're attacking a base. All right. And that puts the onus, on the other members of NATO, saying, they didn't take out Warsaw. They took out this arms depot and these airstrips. Okay. Now it's up to you guys if you want to go up the escalation ladder. Okay. You see my point?
No, I agree with you. And if I were thinking, what Russia's next step would be, those are the kinds of things that I'd be thinking of as to what the next step should be. I mean, I don't think nuclear weapons is the next step.
I hope not.
No. And therefore, of course, if you do that, if you launch an attack on an arms depot, on an airfield, on a military base, yeah, there's going to be a lot of screaming about Article 5, but then Russia's argument will be, but you got yourself involved in a war outside of your territory. You were a party to the conflict. However much Stoltenberg can go on parroting, we are not a party to the conflict. You obviously are a party to the conflict, and we are retaliating. Now, chances are many members of NATO, Article 5, we must go to war.
But but
there'll be voices within NATO, including like Hungary, which will say, no, Article 5 doesn't apply. We've been warning that NATO is heading towards war, and this is what happened. So this is not, a matter of Article 5, because this isn't an unprovoked attack.
Well, the real problem begins, let's stay with our analogy, attack on an arms depot, airfield. NATO gets together and discusses Article 5. It probably won't be unanimous. Hungary, Slovakia, they say, look, we brought this on ourselves. Okay, fine. But then what does NATO do? Let's say Slovakia and Hungary, you're suspended. You're suspended from decision making. Go home. Okay. All right. So you have the rest. What do they do, George? That's right. Do they ask the Americans to bomb St. Petersburg and Moscow? Is that what they asked them to do?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you're absolutely right. Now, I think what happens then is that if there are to be attacks, retaliatory attacks on Russian territory, those attacks will be coming from Europe. The Americans are not going to start attacking from American territory, not at such an early stage. I mean, basically Americans will push the fighting onto someone else. But it might not, because it might focus attention, which at the moment it isn't. People are not paying attention to this. It focuses attention as to, really, we're now on the brink of world war. I mean, we keep saying this, but it's not resonating. I mean, it's just, people think this is cool. Hey, this is nice. This is really exciting. We're on the brink of world war. But once they start, lobbing missiles at one another, it might focus minds.
But our point here, everyone, is that we can get to this threshold without nuclear weapons.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay. And again, to continue with our hypothetical here, Russia has a very sophisticated supersonic hardware right now. I mean, again, going back to our hypothetical, arms depot and airstrips and stuff like that. Doesn't take too many of those supersonic missiles to achieve that job on a really demonstratively huge scale. I mean that will get your attention. But my point is, if such a weapon were used, would NATO believe that nuclear weapons is warranted as a response?
Well, that's a good question. Probably not. But the question then is, would NATO then think do they think they should make a response by attacking Russian territory, even with conventional weapons? I mean, in other words, would they think, okay, now you've attacked whatever an airfield in Poland, we are now going to, NATO is now going to authorize an attack on an airfield in Russia. Would NATO take that next step? I mean, you know, we don't know. I mean, it's like there's a lot of talk about war, whether NATO will take that. Probably NATO will. Probably thinking, oh yeah, this is
my sense. My sense is that they would, for lack of clear thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And this is called game theory, everyone. Okay.
Right.
People are paid a lot of money to do these things. Okay. And usually it ends up like 99% of the time, absolute catastrophe for all.
Well, that's right. Anyway, he goes on. Putin says, without me, maybe not. You will set the heat. They were already scared. Anyway, then he goes on. Although, of course, one might think you are now talking about Europeans, any logic is possible. If, God forbid, it comes to some kind of a strike, then everyone should understand that Russia has an early warning system, a missile attack warning system. The USA has it. There is no such developed system anywhere else in Europe, in the world. We have, in Europe, there is no developed system. In this sense, they are more or less defenseless. So this is the first one. And then he goes on, the second is the power of the blows. Our tactical nuclear weapons are 4 times more powerful than the bombs the Americans used against Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 3 or 4 times. We have many times more of them, both on the European continent, and even if the Americans bring theirs from the USA, we still have many times more. If it comes to this, God forbid, which we really don't want, then you said, let's reduce the sacrifices. They can increase indefinitely. This is the first one. And then it goes on. And of course, the second, these same Europeans will have to think, if those with whom we exchange some blows do not exist, will the Americans get involved in this exchange of blows at the level of strategic weapons or not? I very much doubt it. And Europeans should also think about it. That's for sure.
I agree with that.
But the thing is that it's always been axiomatic, you know, ever since there were all these plans first formulated in the 1950s and 60s about fighting a nuclear war, you know, in the Rand Corporation and so on. It was always assumed that a nuclear war would be fought initially, at least, on the European continent. And that, you know, if it escalates, you know, it's at a later stage that there would be an exchange of nuclear weapons. Now, when the Europeans began getting very anxious about nuclear weapons, like in the 1980s, at the time of the Euro missiles, it was because they made that point. You know, the left were making that point, which is that it's quite possible that there is going to be a nuclear war between the Soviet bloc and NATO. We're going to be in the battlefield. The United States is not going to be in the battlefield. The Soviet Union isn't going to be in the battlefield. We are going to be in the battlefield. And so that's why they said, we don't want any of these nuclear weapons, because that just means that once they're here, they're going to be the targets. And if they're not going to, and since we know that they're going to be targeted, we're going to want to use them right away. And therefore, you know, we're just going to be destroyed. So the point is that he's saying something that's commonsensical, which the Europeans seem to have completely forgotten.
Yep.
Any nuclear exchange will be, initially at least, limited to the European continent. It's not going to go to the Americans until, you know, at a later stage. And one assumes by then, and that's what everyone's always assumed, a war will be brought to an end because once both sides see the devastation, they realize we have to stop this before we destroy the entire planet. So that's why it's always assumed that, well, basically there won't be a strategic exchange of nuclear weapons, but Europe, it's going to take a pounding.
Nope. It's almost inconceivable the U.S. would sacrifice New York, Washington, and Miami for any European city.
Right. No, that's right. So anyway, so then so Putin then continues, but still I proceed from the fact that it will never come to this, and we do not have such a need because our armed forces are not just gaining experience, increasing their efficiency. Our defense industrial complex is demonstrating its effective work. I have said it many times, I can repeat it. We have increased the production of ammunition by more than 20 times. We are many times greater than the enemy's capabilities in aviation technology. We are significantly superior in armed vehicles and so on and so on. We don't even need to think about this topic. Please, and I would also ask everyone not to mention such things in vain once again.
Yeah, cooling things down. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've spent a lot of time talking about it, and you got this guy to talk about it. You knew that these were the questions that we're going to answer. You can't say, well, don't bring up the subject. Well, you invited him for precisely because he's going to bring up these topics.
Well, I think that was all by design. Personally, that's my opinion.
Yeah. So Karaganov says, you behave so responsibly and speak so responsibly, but we are dealing with partners who are absolutely irresponsible and have lost their minds. Now, Putin says here, a terrible person. I think he's referring to Karaganov, is being facetious. You're still talking about this, that you just won't let this go. I think there's a terrible person like you just won't let this go.
I wonder if Putin is pointing at him. A terrible
that's right. Yeah. And then Karaganov says, well, you looked at these partners from the outside like most of us, but I grew up in that system. This happened in my life. I have known them from a young age, and I assure you that I have reason to say what I say. Although I understand perfectly well and support your hesitation, because this is a terrible choice, and the choice should be made only as a last resort. But if they know that you are not ready to make this choice, they will endlessly try to fight and bleed us. And that's
he's got a good point.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. I mean, they've gone from one step to another, to another, to another, and they think, hey, we can do it because Russia isn't going to do this. They're not going to use nuclear weapons. They're going to put up with this. And at the same time, they are fighting not only against us, they are also fighting against our friends in the world majority, because we are the military strategic root, the core of this world majority. If they turn us back, they will begin to suppress them again. I don't know whether the gentlemen presidents agree with this. So the gentleman is the Zimbabwe president and the president of Bolivia. But anyway, Putin then says, allow me to make one remark. The decisions of both mine and my colleagues with whom I work in this area are not associated with any hesitation. There's no hesitation and cannot be. All our decisions must be based on analysis, a real objective analysis of the current situation. That's what we do. And then Karaganov says, well, the day before yesterday, you spoke to the heads of agencies and said something extremely interesting about the fact that we are ready and can supply our long-range weapons to countries that are enemies of our enemies, which is what he said. And I think I was puzzled by what he meant by that. He said, well, we can do the same thing to our adversaries. We can provide weapons to the adversaries of our adversaries and make life difficult for them. But I couldn't think of, well, what's an example?
Well, I think that Larry Wilkerson came up with the example based on this. The predicate that was just mentioned here is that it's according to him. Okay, I have no direct knowledge, obviously, of this, but according to him, there is the possibility that Cuba would take Russian missiles. So going back to 1962. Okay.
Well, I guess the problem with that is that's putting Cuba into a very dangerous position, because if Cuba takes the missiles, America invades. I mean,
well, okay, such a good point, George. Part of the same analysis is that what was mentioned is that the Cuban officials have made it very clear that the U.S. wants to turn Cuba into another Haiti. So, I mean, so Cuba's choices are quite limited. Okay, be at the short end of the stick of an American nuclear strike, or have your country turn into chaos. Okay.
Well, that's right. But I mean, in another analogy that I came across is, well, they're going to provide these nuclear missiles maybe to, but I don't like nuclear missile because that goes into the question of nuclear proliferation treaty and so on that Russia is a signatory of.
No.
But then providing missiles, long-range missiles to Iran, though I think Iran already has them. Iran
already has them.
Yeah, Iran can then use against Israel. But then the same thing applies, because if Iran has this capability, and if Israel then feels threatened, then Israel uses nuclear weapons on Iran. I mean, Israel will not hesitate. So again, you're putting another country into serious jeopardy by doing this.
Well, I mean, my read of this, outside of the analysis from Wilkerson, is that various proxies around the world, but I'm not really impressed by that, because either it's already being done covertly. I'm thinking about Syria, for example. I'm not really sure how far this can actually go, helping our the enemies of our enemies. Okay.
It doesn't go very
it's pretty, it's thin gruel at this point.
It's very thin gruel, because again, in each case, the Americans could just simply wipe that thing off the face of the earth, and that's how they would respond. So it's it's just not. I don't see the analogy at all. But he says, well, this made me very happy because it was long overdue. What will we supply? Both high precision and hypersound. Naturally, with your technical specialists, this could really seriously improve the situation in the world. For example, aircraft carriers, which are generally meaningless tool now in the current circumstances, will leave the world stage, and people will stop spending huge amounts of money on them. What will we supply? When and how? Of course, at the same time, I understand that under no circumstances should we do this ourselves, or at least we should say that we are not doing it.
I don't know what he's trying to get at here, but one thing seems to be very clear to me, George. When you look at these supersonic weapons that are being hypersonic weapons being used and quite effectively, apparently. I don't know, George, if you'd spent decades and decades of research and poured huge resources, do you want to ship something like that over to a country that might lose it or sell it or reverse engineer it? Okay, I wouldn't do that.
No, I don't. And it goes very much against the Russian tradition of extreme caution about doing anything like that. Anyway, Putin says, regarding aircraft carriers, you said they were meaningless. No, they are meaningless only in some kind of global conflict in the strategic sense. And from the point of view of solving geopolitical problems as an instrument of geopolitics, in order to move them towards those territories against which some Americans, French, or British want to fight and force them to do something to make sense. True, taking into account the presence of modern hypersonic weapons in Russia and China to a certain extent, of course, they lose their meaning. You urge us not to spend money on this. Let them spend it. Why did you say this aloud? Let them spend it. So I mean, he's talking about aircraft carriers, but I don't know, it's not.
Putin always makes sure he's in charge of the conversation.
Right. No, that's right. And then Karaganov says, at the moment, I'm addressing our Chinese and Indian friends. They spend extra money. And I said that perhaps there are geopolitical considerations. Putin, it's like a non-strategic weapon. It's just that it has lost meaning as a strategic weapon. But in general, it may be. And in other countries, let them
what other world leaders gets involved in a conversation like
right,
that?
Exactly. So
it's amazing.
It's aircraft carriers.
It's amazing.
That's now
and this conversation is the way it's being presented is essentially equals. Okay, I mean, we have Karaganov. He is pushing hard. Okay,
right.
He's not afraid to push.
Right.
He keeps doing it over and over again.
Right. Now, regarding the fact that we supply weapons, We are not delivering yet, but we reserve the right to do this for these states and even some legal structures that are experiencing a certain pressure on themselves, including of a military nature from those countries that supply weapons to Ukraine, and call for them to be used against us. But again, he's not specifying which countries, what circumstances against our Russian territory. If they supply these weapons to the combat zone and call for the use of these weapons in our territory, why don't we have them then have the right to do the same, to respond in a mirror way? Well, you may have the right, but it's still a question of, well, what practical effect is that going to have? And how does it in any way affect the current situation in Ukraine? I'm also not ready to say this, we will do this tomorrow, because in any case, any such supply is associated with a number of circumstances that in one way or another affect certain regions of the world. And we must, of course, think about this. I mean, one possibility is, of course, Serbia. Serbia, as we've discussed many times before, same with the Republic of Srpska, has always been very vulnerable to a NATO relaunching another war against them. I mean, I guess maybe he means we're going to supply them with
well, considering the
hypersonic weapons or whatever.
Considering the upcoming vote that could happen as well.
Right, exactly. That's big, and that's the thing, and because Milorad Dodik has promised that he's going to have a referendum on secession. You know, I'm always skeptical about Dodik. You know, he often talks a good game and then kind of marches up the hill and then marches down again. But certainly, if he does hold a referendum, then there's a real good chance that NATO will attack, and that may well be. Dodik was there in Moscow. He was at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, so he did talk to Putin, and who knows what they discussed. So Karaganov says, well, let's finish this military part, which is completely unpleasant. Now, in order to advance, if in the near future we very quickly go up the escalation ladder, which I insist on, because this is absolutely not necessary, I think we can come to our senses along the way. Then we may need to mobilize, some at least partial. Do you think that we can defeat the enemy without mobilization, or will we still need to mobilize? And the Putin says, if we follow the recommendations that you made, if we want to do this as quickly as possible, then the current contingent is not enough for us. But we adhere, as I said, to a different tactic. We push the enemy out of those territories that should be brought under our control. In this sense, we have no need to mobilize. We don't plan this. But this is still very interesting. He's saying, okay, if we mobilize, we can get this done quickly. If we don't mobilize, we'll get it done, but it's going to take much longer. I just wonder, how does the Russian public think about this? Would they rather mobilize, get this done, get this over with quickly, or would they prefer to continue down along the same line?
To be honest with you, George, I mean, it's never really articulated that way. I mean, what most people say to me, and to be honest with you, everyone, maybe I'll surprise you. It's the conflict in Ukraine is not what people are talking about all of the time. They're not. They're talking about a lot of other things. Of course, it's mentioned. What people want is they want an end and a good end. I'm sorry, that's not a very articulate way of phrasing it, but they want it done and they want a good ending to it. That's very vague.
Okay. So we mobilized, we called up 300,000 people, but last year, without any mobilization, our men, our patriotic people, voluntarily came to the military registration and enlistment office and signed contracts with armed forces. There were over 300,000 people. Since the beginning of this year, over 160,000 people have come to military registration and enlistment offices and signed contracts. Every day, more than 1,000 people come to military registration and enlistment officers voluntarily. Yes, we know when we see the Russian character is what the character of a Russian citizen is. We understand this and rely on it. We do not need any atomic weapons for final victory. To this, I can only add that we see forced mobilization in Ukraine. Of course, I have no doubt the age of mobilization will decrease. We know for sure that Ukrainian sources that the Americans set the conditions for continued support by reducing the level of mobilization 25, 23, 20, 18, maybe even 18. This is no longer our business. Let them later replace the current leadership of Ukraine. I've talked about this. But what is important to us, this is that somewhere they gain 30, 50 in the month before the last 70,000, in my opinion, they gain. There will be a decrease. What does this mean? This suggests that what they are gaining and will only be used up to make full losses. So what he was saying when he talked to the news agency's head, he said 50,000 are lost every month. 50,000 killed and wounded are lost every month. But he's saying they recruit 30,000 new recruits every month. So essentially, he's saying their manpower is reduced by 20,000 every month. That was his estimate. This is that somewhere they gain 30, blah, blah. In my opinion, they gain. There will be a decrease. What does this mean? This suggests that they are gaining and will gain only to be used up to make up for losses. There will be a slight increase, as I say. We can count in different ways. Now I won't even name the numbers, although they're clear to us. But in this situation, when our people voluntarily come and go to the front to defend their homeland, there is no talk of mobilization. So then Karaganov, he's not happy. Vladimir Vladimirovich, naturally I understand your arguments, but I know the history of our country. I remember 1916 when we won, but the people were tired. Therefore, we still need to start hurrying up at some point. We then snatched defeat from the hands of victory in 1917. So 1916 was a good year for Russia. That was Brusilov's offensive, and they were doing quite well, but then the collapse in 17. Now, thank God, due to the fact that we began, perhaps even belatedly, this operation, the explosive rise in the spirit of the people, it is quite obvious that the economy has finally begun to work, because only in such conditions can we work. The treacherous elements in the fifth columns of compradors have withdrawn or fled, and our Western opponents are liquidating our own. This is all wonderful. This shouldn't continue for long, however, so I think don't write off my and my comrades' arguments that we regularly send you.
Which he does regularly send him.
Okay, and that's the. I mean, they went on after that, but I.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a fascinating discussion. We nowhere else in the world do they pull the curtain open and let you see what's going on. It's really fascinating.
Right.
And what's really sad, George is diligent in working on finding sources, but other people can read this if they want.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
It's all available. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if one draws a conclusion from this, I mean, certainly Putin is not rejecting what Karaganov is saying. He's saying that we don't need to do it for the time being. But he's still saying, but I'm open to changing my mind. I mean, he's saying, in other words, if things go down this path, maybe, our military progress halts, or if the NATO powers continue escalating their involvement, our strategy could change. And then he could, make use of Karaganov's ideas. I mean, when we had Macron, I mean, he's going around now recruiting, these NATO trainers. He said, we got to send these NATO trainers to Ukraine. We got to do this. So, the escalation from NATO isn't stopping. And so that's why,
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty clear, George, is that they're trying to force a Russian reaction. And I think they're going to get it pretty soon. That's my feeling.
I think so. I think
so. Because, let these people mouth off like they do. I mean, it's irresponsible, it's so jingoistic in their Burrell garden mentality. And let people just kind of suck it up. It's out there, the drive to war. Biden essentially denigrated the very important day in modern European history with the invasion of Europe. It was an amazing feat. Okay, many men died, and it was for a good cause, working with their ally, the Soviet Union, which we've already talked about that. Okay, I mean, but if they're so reckless with their rhetoric, okay, and now we have here in the public, well, right now, discussions, that we are very well aware of what you guys are doing. We know what you want to do, and we're going to reserve for ourselves to react when and where and how. And I think we're there. I think we're very, very close to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think so, because I think as we've said this now several times, but I think it's worth emphasizing. Putin chose Karaganov as his moderator. This guy Karaganov is as hawkish as you can get. So of course, yeah, it was a foil for Putin, because hey, Putin comes across as a moderate. But it's also, he's saying to Karaganov, yeah, we read these things you send us, and we're not rejecting it, but maybe the time isn't quite there yet. And I agree with you. I think the more NATO continues down this path, there will have to be a reaction. Because
well, I mean, see,
the Russian people are saying,
there you go. That's exactly what I want to say. Look, it's something that really bothers me when I watch the debate about the Ukraine policy. And what was missing here, and George and I have talked about this before, what's missing here, Ukraine is on its last legs. Okay, yeah, it is. Okay, I can get on board with that easily. But it doesn't change the objective of NATO, okay? What's happening in Ukraine is an epiphenomenon to the goal of what they want to achieve, which is a strategic defeat of Russia, to knock it off from the ranks of great powers. Now, what the only way in NATO's, without going Armageddon, so let's push that aside, okay? Nobody wants to go there. But it's going to be hitting civilians. I mean, what NATO is going to do is resort to terrorism, because they cannot change. See, they're not going to be able to make a dent on Russia's war effort inside of Russia. Okay, they might hit a depot, they might hit this airfield, yeah, but in the broader scheme of things, it's an irritant. Okay, but what won't be irritating, what will be infuriating, is the Russian public. I'm going to say, no, the missiles are not supposed to hit Rostov. No, in Voronezh. No. And that will create a reaction, okay? And what through using Ukraine as a proxy, they're going to hit a residential block, okay? They get everybody's attention, okay? Which is a fool's errand. It's immoral. But would that spur a Russian reaction? Yeah, it will.
Right. No, I think it's absolutely right. I think what NATO's calculation is that NATO can escalate, can hit targets in Russia, with cheerful abandon, in the firm knowledge that Russia will not respond in kind, that Russia will not retaliate. So it's basically, they said, hey, we've got a foolproof system of waging war against Russia without endangering ourselves. Aren't we clever? And what we get is, Stoltenberg says, we are not a party to the conflict. And that's all. And he thinks that by repeating this idiotic mantra, that becomes a fact that somehow NATO is not a party to the conflict. Well, of course, NATO is a party to the conflict. Clearly, Russia will have to retaliate. NATO is assuming Russia will capitulate, because they're saying we can't possibly take on NATO. We can't wage war with NATO. We will capitulate. That's why Macron and all the rest that just keep repeating, we cannot allow Russia to win. We cannot allow Russia to win. We cannot allow Russia to win. Then they're saying that's it. So we have to inflict a defeat on Russia. And then once that happens, Russia will, Putin will be replaced. Russia will just disintegrate. And then basically everything's great. We're just going to pick up all the bits and pieces. That's the calculation. It's a reckless, insane calculation, but that's what's going on in the minds of NATO.
Well, but see, George is absolutely right, because we've talked about this for, I guess, 2 years now, and we've given endless examples of how NATO feels with impunity it can go up the escalation ladder, because it knows that the tipping point for Russia is probably way towards the horizon. So let's keep doing this. But see, what George and I have discussed here on the back of the interview that Putin gave is that Russia will go apples to apples. See, NATO wants to go apples and oranges, okay? And the Russians, through our analogy using a Polish depot, that's going to refocus attention. Now, I absolutely firmly believe that is scary and terrifying as that possibility is, that's the only way Russia can react apples to apples,
right.
Military against military.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And will that focus the attention of NATO? I tend to think it will. Will it solve everything? I don't know. These people are so dead set.
Right,
See,
exactly.
you know, Russia must be defeated. What does that mean? Okay. Ukraine must win. What does that mean? Okay. And this is all done intentionally because what's the term that Blinky is using now, the Undertaker? Adjust and adapt, adjust and adapt,
Right.
adjust and adapt.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, but it's very interesting because the analogy that we were using, Russia hits an airfield or an army base in Poland, you know, or an arms depot. NATO goes into emergency conference, you know, there'll be Poland, the Baltics, the British, yeah, Article 5. And then you have to wonder, well, okay, what are the other things? We know how Hungary and Slovakia will respond. They'll say no. What about others? You know, what about Greece? How will Greece respond?
Well, George, in all honesty, how will Biden respond? Does he want to be in the middle of a shooting war with a nuclear power Russia in the middle of an election? Really?
Yeah. I tend to think these people are so insane. I mean, you know, Biden's rhetoric is now so insane that they've really got themselves into this mindset that, hey, we're fighting Hitler. This is 1943, 1944. We're fighting Hitler. I mean, but I guess, you know, probably they will succeed, you know, like as you said, they'll probably kick out Hungary and Slovakia or temporarily suspend Hungary and Slovakia, and they'll move up the escalatory ladder, at least conventional attacks.
Well,
we see what
everyone,
happens then.
I'm sorry, but I think it's an important thing to note. Under our theoretical model here that we're suggesting is that Hungary and Slovakia will be excluded from the command and control. There's probably no mechanism for it, but they'll figure that out later. Okay, they'll somehow retroactively make it possible. That's how these people think.
Yeah.
This is how these people think.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted you at a key point there. Is that at this point, I think it all stays conventional. It all stays conventional.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Again, you know, it's been making the rounds. Russia has to make some kind of demonstration. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
No, I don't.
To prove they have them, or
the demonstrative thing makes absolutely no sense, because if you do a demonstrative, then obviously say, okay, the reason you're doing it demonstratively is that you're afraid to use it for real. So it has the opposite effect that you're wanting. They'll say, yeah, that means you're not going to use it. So if you're going to use it, then use it. But I like you, I just don't see any reason at this stage to go nuclear. But, you know, that's what Putin said. Who knows? You know, we gotta think ahead. You know, maybe our doctrine will change. I mean, it is fast moving, and you know, with these demented people who are in charge in the West, who the hell knows where they're going to go?
I'm so glad that George and I are doing this, because we're doing it all in real time. And George is right; things are moving very, very fast, and it's really, I mean, it's no longer theoretical. This is all real. It's actually happening. Okay. Right. And one thing living here is that having an increase in a attack on Russian cities and facilities, that's a non-starter. I mean, the threshold for accepting that is like that deep. It just no. We're we have to get rid of this odious regime in Ukraine because they were the way they treated ethnic and Russian speakers. Yeah, that's all. We're all on board on that. But we're not on board for losing Rostov and Voronezh. Okay, particularly if we can put a stop to it. Okay, that's where we're going. Is that what the Blinkens and the Sullivans and the Macrons, is that what they want? God help us all.
Yeah, I don't see any movement on their part to de-escalate. I just don't see it. There's been no sign at all that they're willing to de-escalate. They're absolutely convinced. I don't know, somebody who told them, maybe Macron or somebody they told them Russia will capitulate. They're absolutely convinced of this. It's not going to happen. But I think it's safe to do this. Boris Johnson, he said this over and over again. Russia, I mean, he's pretty much said Russians are cowards. I mean, I think the Russians are cowards. They'll be, this fat slob, is calling other people cowards. Yeah, they're cowards. They're going to cave. So I think this insanity.
Yeah, but see, George, but what these people are doing, they're doing game theory. I'd like to take them, by the collar and say, but this is real. This is not inside a think tank.
Yeah.
Where the opposing team is in the other room.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
This is not a drill, everyone. This is very real. And again, this interview that we went through thoroughly, not all of it, because both these guys are talkers. Okay, they're talkers.
Yes.
But they're giving you a preview. Take it seriously. Read it. Think about it. As Stephen Cohen, God bless his soul, remember what he constantly told us. Always put yourself in the other guy's shoes. You got to do that. The Russians are doing it. They're putting themselves in the other guy's shoes, but NATO is not.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
because, this is messianic and, it's just like that. When people start talking like that, we see a lot of that with the Israel-Palestine, where it's getting so messianic. You can't deal with people like that. You can't reach out and have contact with them. You can't communicate with such people. And this is what we have with these NATO buffoons.
Right.
Stoltenberg, we're not a member. We're not a party of the. I mean, after 2.5 years, you idiot, you keep saying these things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is just amazing. He says this, and because the media never challenges, when you say you are actually doing the shooting. I mean, you are doing the targeting. You're doing the shooting. You are not a party to the conflict. I mean, do you really think that everybody's so stupid that they're just going to be taken in by this? You think the Russians are going to be taken? And this is what was said by Mearsheimer. Just because you say that you are defensive, you don't get to decide that. It's the adversary who's going to make a decision. Are you a threat or not a threat? You can't say we are not a threat to you, and oh well, that's it. That ends the discussion. We're not.
It's kind of like giving your business. Look, here's my business card. We're a defensive alliance. It's here. Okay.
That's it.
Don't believe 90% of what you read, folks. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
And zero what people say. Okay.
Exactly. We are defensive. And no, it's others who are going to decide whether you pose a threat or not. And Stoltenberg just simply said, well, we're defensive. We don't pose a threat to anyone. Okay, well, end of discussion. Well, that's it. I'm happy. With Stoltenberg's assurances. I'm good.
I'm good. There, this is. It was Barbara Tuchman, her book, "The Guns of August." How the European powers stumbled into World War I. But we learned about all of that through when the archives were opened up, and we could see what these diplomats were all saying. This is 2024, everybody. You don't need an archive. It comes right into your lap. I mean, you can just read it. Okay. Right. I mean, I don't know. I can speak for myself, George. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
to keep up with what's going on. It's so
Yes.
much. It's moving so fast.
No, that's it. That's exactly right. And I think that's why we got lucky in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, because at the time, just about everybody who was involved in the decision making had fought in World War II. They all had a living memory of World War II. And so I said, no, we don't want to go there. Some of them even had a living memory of World War I. I mean, so it's just like those, many people, someone like Dean Acheson, he would have a living memory of World War I. And they said, no, we cannot go down this path. Now you've got Annalena Baerbock and Emmanuel Macron. They have no living memory of anything. That's why it's
Well,
so
and
dangerous.
also, if you look at, I'm glad you brought up the Cuban Missile Crisis, considering what we just did by going through forensically what you can learn from the public discourse. You have to remember is that the Americans and the Soviets were passing notes back and forth during all of this.
Right.
And I don't know who it was. I have to go back and check. But there was a second note. What was it? Those machines that what do they call them? A machine, a telex machine, where they're the typewriter is in it, and they're trying to figure out what are the differences between the second and the third message, and they're going through it. And someone said, let's reply to the second one because that's a good one for us. Okay. And say, replying to your note of this, and then the Soviets are saying, oh, now we know what the Americans are kind of interested in here. And that's when it started to slow down a little bit because they found things that they could cling on to. Okay. Because maybe the first note was a little too rough, a little too extremist, but we can see what the other side is like. And this is how it resolved. Okay. They started communicating with each other. Okay. And it's a fascinating story. But here, we have like Putin in St. Petersburg. I mean, it'll take you hours and hours to go through all of the reporting on what happened in St. Petersburg. I mean, I kind of gave up today. Okay. I had to take one of my dogs to a clinic. Okay. But there's a whole lot. Is there anybody in the State Department reading this?
No. And interestingly, the media, I looked through what the media reporting. They're reporting the fact that Putin's daughters were there. How exciting! Putin's daughters were there. This is completely uninteresting. I mean, it seems like these are his daughters. One of them spoke, the other one didn't speak. But that seemed to be a far more greater interest to the Western media than this discussion, which we had analyzed. I mean, again, just shows the utter triviality of our.
Well, Joe Biden is going to blow off Zelensky's fake peace conference because he has to go to meet some donors in Hollywood. Okay, that's how serious these people are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, George and I giving you this here in real time. I personally get depressed thinking a lot about this. Okay. I don't want to get killed in Russia by an American missile. There's something wrong about that. Okay.
Definitely
something wrong with that. All right. And I got my boys to worry about, right, Bud?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We're signing off on Sunday here. Finally, long day. This is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Tomorrow, we have live stream tomorrow?
Tomorrow, live stream, 10 a.m. Eastern time. So it's a live stream with Peter and George. So people who miss Peter, because usually they just get me on the live stream, but now they'll have the benefit of you, the dogs, if they bother to show up, which they.
But you still have your live stream on Tuesday,
yeah,
right?
I still have my live stream, but this one, people can talk to you. So please join us 10 a.m. Eastern time. Come with questions. We love questions and can think about and analyze and so on. So please come. It's going to be on Rumble. It's going to be on YouTube and Twitter, on Locals. It'll be on all of the platforms. So please come. We're very grateful for all of your help, but there is, tip jars that need to be filled. The
Buddy hasn't been here, hasn't made an appearance.
Exactly.
For a while.
Exactly. The prodigal son returns. He hasn't been around. Kind of a nomad. Has wandered back. his travels in the desert, he has wandered back. So so please, we have the Rumble, we have the Rumble rants, that's if you can, put in a something in the rant box, that's going to be very nice. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. Yeah, another one. He's going to show up. Yeah, I'm going to be there. So yeah, we're very grateful for all your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can do, the more of these live streams we can do, and above all, we're going to bring these these hounds, these ferocious hounds, back into the fold. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.